Something surreal about watching a partnership that seemed absolutely unbreakable just crumble before our eyes. Carlos Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero weren't just coach and player, they were the modern tennis dream team, the blueprint for how a coaching relationship should work in today's game. And yet, here we are in early 2026, and Alcaraz is sitting across from reporters, trying to explain why he's moving forward without the man who helped sculpt him into a world number one. The tennis world has been buzzing with speculation ever since whispers of their separation started making the rounds last month. Some said it was about money. Others claimed there were disagreements over Alcaraz's schedule and the relentless grind of competing at the highest level. There were even rumors about family pressures and outside influences trying to get into Carlos's ear. But when Alcaraz finally broke his silence yesterday at a press conference in Indian Wells, what he revealed was somehow both simpler and more complex than anyone expected. "We made this decision together," Alcaraz said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of someone who's clearly thought about these words 1,000 times before saying them out loud. It wasn't one person saying "I'm done" or walking away angry. We sat down, we talked honestly about where we both are, and we realized that maybe it's time for something different. He paused, seeming to measure his next words carefully. "Juan Carlos will always be part of my tennis story. What we accomplished together, nobody can take that away. But sometimes in life, you have to make changes even when things are good, because you know they could be better or different in a new way." It's a mature perspective from someone who only turned 22 last May. But then again, Alcaraz has never really acted his age when it comes to handling pressure. This is the kid who won his first Grand Slam at the US Open and didn't seem fazed by any of it. The same guy who trades punches with Djokovic and Sinner like he's been doing it for 15 years instead of 3. But talking about Ferrero clearly hits different. You could see it in the way his hands moved as he spoke, the occasional glance downward, the slight crack in his voice when he mentioned their early days working together in Villena. Their partnership began back when Alcaraz was still a teenager, trying to figure out if he could really make it at the professional level. Ferrero, himself, a former French Open champion and world number one, saw something special in the kid from El Palmar. It wasn't just the forehand that could tear the cover off the ball, or the speed that made him look like he was gliding across the court while everyone else was running through mud. Ferrero saw the hunger, the willingness to suffer, the kind of competitive fire that you can't teach, no matter how many hours you spend on the practice court. The early years of their collaboration were electric. Alcaraz was this raw talent, a tornado of energy and potential, and Ferrero was the steady hand guiding him through the chaos of professional tennis. They worked endless hours at the academy in Villena, refining Carlos's movement, sharpening his decision-making, building the mental fortitude required to compete against players who'd been on tour for a decade. Friends close to the team say Ferrero was more than a coach during those years. He was a mentor, almost a second father figure, someone who understood the pressure of being Spain's next great hope after the Nadal era. What Alcaraz revealed about their working relationship was fascinating because it goes against so much of what we assume about these coach-player dynamics. "Juan Carlos never tried to change who I was as a player," he explained. "From the beginning, he told me we were going to build on my strengths, not fix my weaknesses by making me into someone else. That gave me so much confidence when I was younger and still trying to find my identity on tour." It's a coaching philosophy that clearly worked. Alcaraz's game is uniquely his own, a thrilling mix of power and finesse, aggression tempered by remarkable touch, the kind of style that makes highlight reels, but also wins matches against the absolute best players in the world. But here's where things get interesting, and where Alcaraz's comments yesterday started to peel back the layers on why this split happened now. "The game is changing so fast," he said, leaning forward slightly. his intensity building as he warmed to the topic. What worked 2 years ago doesn't necessarily work the same way today. The guys I'm playing against, they're adapting, they're finding new ways to compete, new strategies. I felt like I needed to bring in different perspectives, different voices, people who might see things that we weren't seeing anymore because we'd been working together in the same way for so long. It's a brutally honest admission, and one that probably stung Ferrero to hear, even if they discussed it privately first. Alcaraz wasn't saying his former coach had nothing left to offer. He was saying something perhaps more difficult, that their partnership had reached a natural ceiling, that the diminishing returns had set in, that staying together out of loyalty or comfort might actually be holding him back from wherever he needs to go next in his career. The timing is particularly noteworthy because it's not like Alcaraz is struggling. He's world number one. He won 2 Grand Slams last year. His rivalry with Jannik Sinner has become the most compelling storyline in men's tennis. But maybe that's exactly the point. He's not struggling, but he's also not improving at the rate he thinks he should be. In professional sports, especially at the absolute pinnacle, standing still is the same as moving backward. If Sinner is getting better, if the next generation is coming up hungry and fearless, if Djokovic is somehow still competing at 38 and finding new ways to win, then Alcaraz has to keep evolving too. When asked about the specifics of what went into the decision, Alcaraz was careful not to air any dirty laundry, but he did acknowledge there were some difficult conversations along the way. Of course we had moments where we didn't agree, he admitted. That's normal in any relationship that lasts this long and means this much. There were times when I wanted to try something new, and maybe Juan Carlos thought we should stick with what we knew worked. Or times when he pushed me in a direction that didn't feel right to me. We always talked through it, always respected each other, but those conversations were happening more often recently. That accumulation of small disagreements, that subtle drift in vision and philosophy, it's what ends most partnerships in professional sports. It's rarely one dramatic blow-up or betrayal. It's the slow realization that you're not quite aligned anymore, that the player wants to go left and the coach wants to go right, and eventually someone has to make a decision about whether to compromise or move on. Think about some of the other high-profile coaching splits we've seen in tennis over the years: Murray and Lendl, Djokovic and Becker, even Nadal's various coaching adjustments throughout his career. Most of them weren't acrimonious. They were just the natural evolution of careers that demand constant adaptation. What struck me most about Alcaraz's comments was how much he emphasized his support system going forward. I have a lot of confidence in the people around me now, he said, and he named several members of his team, his fitness coach, his physio, his agent, even his family members who travel with him to tournaments. It's clear he's not approaching this as a solo venture or some kind of independent streak. He's building something new, maybe something more collaborative and less centered on one dominant coaching voice. This approach actually mirrors what we've seen from some other top players recently. Sinner, for instance, works with a team of coaches rather than relying on one primary voice. Medvedev has famously bounced between different coaching setups throughout his career. Even the big three, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, all went through periods where they adjusted their teams, brought in new perspectives, or completely overhauled their approach to training and competition. The idea that you need one lifelong coach to achieve greatness is becoming outdated in modern tennis. There's been speculation that Alcaraz might bring in someone with experience coaching at the absolute highest level, maybe someone who's worked with multiple Grand Slam champions and understands what it takes to not just reach number one, but stay there for years. Names like Goran Ivanisevic, Marian Vida, and even Patrick Mouratoglou have been floated in tennis circles, though Alcaraz refused to comment on any specific candidates. Right now, I'm focused on playing and competing, he said. The coaching situation will sort itself out when it's meant to. I'm not in a rush to make the wrong decision just because people want answers. It's a measured approach, and honestly, probably the smart play. Alcaraz has tournaments to win, ranking points to defend, and a career that's still very much in its upward trajectory. Making a hasty decision about his next coaching hire could set him back months or even years. Better to take the time, consult with people he trusts, maybe even try out a few different arrangements before committing to something long-term. We've seen what happens when players make panic hires or bring in big-name coaches just for the prestige. It rarely works out if the chemistry and philosophy aren't aligned. The reaction from Ferrero has been notably gracious, at least publicly. He released a statement shortly after Alcaraz's press conference saying he was proud of everything we achieved together and that he respects Carlos's decision and wishes him nothing but success. Reading between the lines, you get the sense that this split, while difficult, was handled about as well as it could be. There doesn't seem to be bitterness or burned bridges, just two people who worked incredibly well together for a time and now are choosing to go separate ways. Ferrero also mentioned in his statement that he would be taking some time to evaluate his own future in coaching. At 44, he's young enough to start fresh with another player if he wants, experienced enough that he'd be an attractive option for any rising talent looking for guidance, but also successful enough that he doesn't need to coach at all if he'd rather focus on other ventures. His academy in Villena is thriving, producing talented players year after year. He could easily shift his focus there, working with the next generation in a less intensive, less travel-heavy capacity. For tennis fans, this is the kind of storyline that adds layers to the narrative we're already following. Alcaraz was already compelling as the young superstar trying to establish himself as the face of the sport's future. Now, he's doing it without the coaching safety net that got him here, which either makes him more vulnerable or more determined, depending on how you look at it. His next few tournaments are going to be absolutely fascinating to watch, not just for the results, but for how he competes, what adjustments he makes, how he handles the pressure of proving this decision was the right one. The psychological aspect of this transition can't be understated either. Alcaraz is someone who feeds off energy, off emotion, off the connection he has with the people in his corner. Ferrero was a constant presence in his box for years, someone whose reactions and body language Carlos could read from across the court, someone who knew exactly what to say during changeovers to calm him down or fire him up. Building that kind of rapport with someone new isn't going to happen overnight. There will be an adjustment period, moments of uncertainty, matches where he misses having that familiar voice in his ear. Looking ahead, the Australian Open is going to be the first real test of this new era for Alcaraz. He'll be defending champion there, which comes with its own pressure, but now he'll be doing it without Ferrero in his box. The optics alone are going to create storylines. Who's sitting where, who's talking to him between sets, how he handles the big moments without that familiar voice, giving him tactical advice and emotional support. The tennis media is going to dissect every match, every gesture, looking for signs of whether this change is helping or hurting his game. The Australian Open also represents a specific challenge because of the conditions. The heat, the hard courts, the unique rhythm of a Grand Slam down under, these are factors that Alcaraz and Ferrero had figured out together. They had routines, preparation strategies, ways of managing the physical and mental demands of competing in Melbourne in January. Now, Carlos will need to navigate all of that with a different support system, possibly without a designated coach at all if he hasn't made a hire by then. It's going to be a trial by fire, and the results could shape the narrative of his entire 2026 season. But if we've learned anything about Carlos Alcaraz over the past few years, it's that he doesn't really do predictable. He wins matches he's supposed to lose. He plays his best tennis when the pressure is highest. He smiles and jokes around even when the moment seems too big for someone his age. There's something in his DNA that seems to thrive on chaos, on uncertainty, on moments where conventional wisdom says he should be overwhelmed. Maybe that's why, despite all the uncertainty around this coaching change, it's hard to bet against him figuring it out. the broader context here is also worth considering. Tennis is in a fascinating transitional moment right now. The Big Three era is definitively over, with Federer retired, Nadal winding down, and Djokovic still competing, but clearly in the twilight of his career. The sport is desperately searching for its next generation of stars, and Alcaraz is right at the center of that conversation, along with Sinner. How he handles this coaching transition, how he evolves his game over the next year or two, could determine whether he becomes a dominant force who wins 15 or 20 Grand Slams, or someone who had incredible peaks but couldn't sustain greatness over a full career. In his closing comments yesterday, Alcaraz seemed to address that very point. "I know people are going to wonder if I made a mistake," he said. "I know there will be doubts and questions, especially if I lose some matches early on. But I trust myself. I trust my game. I trust that I know what I need to keep improving and becoming the player I want to be. Juan Carlos helped me become world number one, and I'll always be grateful for that. But staying world number one, winning more Grand Slams, building a legacy, that's on me now. That's my responsibility, and I'm ready for it." It's the kind of statement that could look either incredibly confident or incredibly naive, depending on how the next 6 months unfold. History is littered with talented players who made coaching changes at the wrong time and never quite recovered their best form. It's also full of examples of players who knew exactly when they needed to shake things up and came back stronger than ever. Which path will Alcaraz follow? That's the question that will define the next chapter of his career and potentially the next era of men's tennis. We're watching these decisions play out in real time, watching young athletes make choices that will define their careers, watching partnerships end and new eras begin. Carlos Alcaraz just entered a new phase of his journey, and honestly, none of us know where it's going to lead, but we'll all be watching closely to find out.